Hello and welcome to another episode of 1000 Actually Fun Books, where we are reviewing books of every genre, looking for the best of fun escapist books. Today we are doing The Midnight Library by Matt Haig. I think that's how you pronounce it. This is a general fiction, the things that I tend to call literary books, but it's got a touch of, I'm not sure whether you call it fantasy or science fiction on it, because there are parallel realities, and that can be either fantasy or science fiction depending on how you want to categorize it. Alright, let's talk about our plot. So our plot revolves around Nora, our average everyday young woman who is finding life is unsatisfactory. So much so that she is depressed and basically commits suicide right at the beginning of the book. She overdoses. And what ends up happening to her is she doesn't die, she doesn't go to the afterlife. Instead, she goes to an in-between place that the book in the middle kind of gives a pseudoscience description of exactly what this is, but the idea behind it is that the universe, there's multiple parallel dimensions, all slightly different from every choice you make, every possibility, an infinite level of possibilities. So she ends up in an in-between world where she has the option to go visit all those infinite possibilities. She can drop into anything that she wants to come up with. She's like, I want to be a rock star. Well, she can go into that reality. I want to be successfully running a vineyard with a family. Okay, she can go do that. I want to be a lifeguard. She can go do that. Whatever it may be that she can come up with. Or maybe it's specifically not a result. It could be, what are the results of if I made a different decision in the past? What if I had kept my cat indoors that day instead of letting him out? What would have happened? What would my life be like today because of that? And you get to see that outcome. So the plot revolves around her in this place, and she is told while she's in this in-between place that she has the opportunity to find the ideal life. What is it that is ultimately the perfect life for her? And then she could go and be in that life. She could basically take it over. That could be her life for the rest of eternity or whatever until she dies. And so she is bopping through different versions of herself. It's always herself, always decisions she makes. She can't base it, she can't go to a life where somebody else made a different decision strictly, based on that. It has to be something she did. So she can say something like, I dedicated my life to become an Olympic champion, worked really hard to get that, and she could get that life. But she can't choose a life where it's like, and my brother worked really hard to be an Olympic champion, because that would have been his decisions, not hers. So things like that. Or she can't necessarily change things that have happened in the past that didn't have anything to do with her. Like, if her mother got cancer and died, she can't go to a reality where her mother didn't get cancer and die, because it has nothing to do with her choices. Anyway, she always goes to the same day in that reality, the same day that she committed suicide. So it's like she's redoing that same day over and over again, but there were different circumstances that led up to that day. Because obviously her choices that made her into an Olympic champion would be different than the choices that would make her into a rock star, right? So the day is the same day, but it's different circumstances. Okay, so as she's going through life after life after life, she's looking for her ideal life. Okay, so that's kind of the outline of the book, and I'm going to say there's going to be some spoilers for the end in this. Minor spoilers, I'm not going to give all the details, but enough because it's relevant to my review here. Alright, so first of all, things that I liked. So I think that there were some relatable emotions for our main character Nora, especially at the beginning. She's feeling overwhelmed with life, she's feeling that she wants to make it all go away. She's fearing life. She's fearing the future. And a lot of that can be very relatable for everybody. Everybody comes up and says, my life stinks, or I really wish I had made different choices in the past. That idea of regretting things that you missed out on opportunities, or you made the wrong decisions or whatever, and you wish you could redo that, okay? That's a relatable idea. And so I liked that about this. It kind of reminds me of It's a Wonderful Life, or even A Christmas Carol, and that idea of somebody getting to see behind the scenes of what life would be like if something else had happened, and then going from there. Okay, so I did like that. I'm going to say it has a happy ending, which I did like. There is a caveat there that I'm going to get to when I get to the dislikes, though, about this ending. But it does have a pat happy ending. And I did like that. I didn't want it to be a depressing, and then she died. I mean, that would have been awful. Or, she just gave up and kept leaping forever, or something like that. That, again, would have been kind of depressing. So the author did a good job in having a happy ending. I will say also, this would make an excellent book club book. This is the kind of book that has a lot of philosophical musings in it. Both our main character, she's really into philosophy. That's one of the things that is big in this book. Various philosophers get quoted a lot, and they discuss philosophical concepts. A little bit highbrow in that respect, a little bit intellectual, and that leaves for a lot of questions for a group discussion on, would you agree with this? Do you think this was a good decision? Do you think that this is actually relevant in reality? That kind of stuff. This is the kind of book, like I said, it would make a great book club discussion book. However, let's get to the things that I didn't like. Okay. So some of the main things, the biggest thing is this is antithetical to my worldview. The author is clearly either an atheist or an agnostic, and because there's a huge amount of discussion in the book about philosophical musings, it bases all its ideas on that foundation. And I don't have that same foundation. I'm a Christian. And my foundation does not always mesh with the author's foundation. So, for example, let me give you just a couple of examples of where this caused some problems to me. Especially how I felt that the author was very shallow in the way that they resolved problems. So, let's talk about one. Regrets. This is a huge thing in this book. The author is having our main character, Nora, resolve a whole bunch of regrets in her life. But the way he resolves regrets is he basically, so we'll take the cat example because this was really early on in the book. Her cat dies, and she thinks if she had made a different choice, the cat would have lived. That seems pretty straightforward. So this is a regret in her life. Now, in my worldview, there can be greater meaning, even bad things can have good outcomes. And that is my philosophical worldview meaning, okay? Now, the author doesn't do that. They don't resolve it that way. Instead, what she has to do is she has to experience making a different choice and seeing that outcome, and seeing that it had a different outcome or the same outcome makes her no longer regret that choice. Okay, so the way to resolve regrets in this, the message is the only way to not have regrets is to see what would have happened if you had made those choices, and to see that it isn't any better or it isn't any worse or whatever it is, and that's what resolves your regrets. Now, I totally disagree with that as a worldview philosophy. I don't think that you need to know what would have happened in order to no longer regret something. I think, letting it go is a better choice. Forgiving somebody, even if they don't deserve it, is a better choice than seeing how they get punished for it, or the way they get away with it, or whatever it may be, carrying the bitterness, it doesn't matter, is a better choice philosophically. So my worldview is different on this, and so the way this resolves it to me is very shallow. It's not something that somebody in real life can apply. You can't go back in time and see what those other choices would have resolved in real life. So it gives you an answer for how she resolves her regrets, but it's not relatable to a real person. You can't do that. So it's a very shallow answer. Another example of this is towards the end of the book. Our main character is in a life where she has a family, including a daughter. Daughter is 4 or something. And the daughter comes up to her and asks, "Mommy, what happens after you die?" Now, as an atheist and agnostic, the true answer is your life is meaningless, you will die, and everyone will forget you. There is no point. I mean, that's the answer. That's the real answer. And she obviously, and the real response is that, well, that's not very comforting. All right, that's fine. That can be somebody's worldview, but that's not what the author has her do. Instead, the author has Nora answer and say, well, sometimes people get to go into an in-between place, and then they get to spend time bouncing to other lives, experiencing them. And then the daughter goes, oh, that's nice. Now, you think about that deeper and go, she didn't actually answer the question, because this is before you die. You have one lifetime. Yes, bouncing through lives in parallel universes could have extended her life. She has the present day frozen for a couple hundred years afterwards if she's really bouncing for a long time. She continues to do that same day over and over and over and over and over again. Fine. And she could extend it for a while in that lifetime, because it's not limited to a 24-hour period or something like that. She could spend years in some other life experiencing it, and then be dissatisfied and bounce back out and do a different one. Or she could stay there until natural death and death happens. Either way, eventually you're going to die, right? This is just extending life. This is not what happens after you die. So she didn't answer her daughter's question. She basically was like, well, don't worry, it's a long ways off. That's basically the answer that she gave. And the daughter's like, oh, that's nice. And it's a shallow answer. Not only am I completely disagreeing with the answer, which is fine, but it wasn't answering the question. And if you superficially read the book, you may skip right over that and not realize that the question wasn't even answered. And so that's a shallow response to this. So my idea in this book is that it gives lots of philosophical answers to deep questions, but honestly, the answers are shallow. They're not good answers. And a lot of the answers I disagree with. So I didn't like that about this book. But it does make for good discussion questions. Like if you disagree with this or you agree with this in a group setting, if you're comfortable talking about that kind of thing, then this would make for a great discussion. So it's kind of this positive, negative, as long as you're aware enough to see where those moments are in what they're talking about. All right. Other things I didn't like about it. So I felt like the ending, so this is where the spoilers get. The ending to me was not satisfying. Because again, you remember how I said the point is she's bouncing from life to life, trying to find the best, most successful, the best fit for her life. Whether that's being famous like a rock star, being super rich, whether it's being powerful, whether it's, doing this thing she's always wanted to do, whether it's beating climate change, whatever it may be, right? If she can find the one thing, then she will be happy and she will stay in the life. And in the last life she lives, you can see her starting to go into that. She finds a life where she has a family that not only does she feel like she could fall in love with, because obviously she's bouncing in the middle, so she didn't get the whole build up to this family, but so they love her and she feels she could love them, and her conclusion is it's really the love and relationships that make life worth meaning. This is basically my ideal life. And you can see how she could continue on in that. Now, what could happen here, and you see this hinting in this final life, she starts getting memories from the Nora that she was taking the place of. So it's like she and the previous Nora are merging, and she's going to just go into this life, and the longer she's there, the more she becomes the person that was originally there, like they become one person. And so eventually she would just be the original Nora in this new life, and they live happily ever after. Okay, but she ends up having some unhappiness here, and she bounces out of that life. And bouncing out of that life, she says, I want to live. Because remember, she committed suicide at the beginning. I want to live. and she goes back to her root life. And to me, I'm sitting there going, wait a minute. She was super happy in this life. She was basically going to become the person that was going to live in this life, like she had never left, like she was always there. And she leaves it to go back to her life where she has nothing. Now, in this suicidal life, she felt like she had no friends, no family, no job, no cat, no nothing, right? That's why she committed suicide. She was like, I have nothing. Nothing has changed. So she has a revelation that she needs love and family, but going back to her root life doesn't give her that. At least not without the happy ending that the author is like, and all the people that she was missing contact her and she lives happily ever after, kind of thing. But why does she go back to her root life? Why is that the ending of this book? It doesn't actually, to me, make a lot of sense. It seems like the way the book was leading up, it should have been that she stayed in that one life, became that Nora, and lived happily ever after there. With the solution, with the moral of the story being, relationships and love are the key to happiness or something like that, right? And it seems like the way it was leading up to. And then it just did a 180. Nope, we're going to go back to your crappy life, but it will be better now because you have resolved to live without anything changing. And I mean, I don't necessarily disagree with the idea of live your crappy life because it would, it could get better, that there is still meaning in even the worst circumstances, that she shouldn't have committed suicide, all that kind of thing. The will to live is a good thing. I don't disagree with this. It just doesn't seem like the author made that choice clear as this is what would, you don't see her decision-making process being very clear there. I just didn't think that resolved well. I will say also, because it has that depression, suicidal idealization going on, I don't think this is a good book for somebody who struggles with that. Because again, with the ending not making it a clear resolution, somebody who struggles with depression and suicidal idealization, I think would find this book encouraging in that direction. I don't think it would discourage them from going through with it. So I think that is bad, very bad. I don't think a book that encourages suicide is a good thing. That's a bad thing. So I would consider that the kind of thing that makes this a poor book for some people. All right, my final thing on this, which is things that I don't like, would be the length of chapters. There are some really, really, really short chapters in this. This is the kind of book that the average chapter length is probably like 3 pages. Some of them, you get a single chapter that's 1 page with 2 lines on it, and that's the whole chapter. And I don't love that format. I'm kind of like, spend a little time here. You don't need to have that much white space in your book. So I didn't like that. Okay, my overall impression. I did not like this book enough to give it a 2 thumbs up. I'm going to give it just an okay. I do think there's positive things about this book. I thought it was interesting to read. I think it would be fun to discuss with people. I don't necessarily think that it was an excellent book, though. Both because of the shallow philosophy, the fact that I disagreed with a lot of their worldview, the fact that I think it's actually bad for somebody who's struggling with depression, all to me make it a negative book. So I'm going to just say, okay, if this thinking type intellectual book really appeals to you, then go for it, as long as your mental health is good. Okay, part 2. I'm going to do, next book, No Country for Old Men by Cormac McCarthy. So I think this is an action country book. I believe it's also been made into a movie, but I've never seen it, never read this book, so that'll be our next book, kind of a country western, modern country western, I think, with gunslingers and, well, not really modern, and action. So, thank you for watching, and I hope you join me next week.